I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to Old's Oscar Countdown, Season 10. We are back for another season of talking about the Oscars. Welcome. If you're new to the channel, welcome back. If you've been watching the After the Gold series, welcome to my new flagship series, Old's Oscar Countdown, where every single year, starting in October, all the way up until the Oscars, week by week, oftentimes multiple times a week, I give my thoughts on the upcoming Oscars, who I think will get nominated, and eventually who I think is going to win. We are on Season 10, Year 9 of Old's Oscar Countdown. You can see my predictions all the way back since the 2016 La La Land Manchester by the Sea Moonlight year, and the exciting times there. Every single year we've been covering the Oscars, and I'm excited once again to break down the Oscars with this video, the one we start with every year, the big one, the Best Picture predictions. Now, still want to kind of have some caveats that what we're going to do this year is a little bit different than last year. The format will be the same each and every week, covering a different category, and then once we get a little bit closer down to the Oscars, we'll be doing Golden Globe predictions and Critics' Choice Award reactions and all that good stuff as well as we kind of get along. But the first few weeks here will be Best Picture video, Best Actress video, Best Actor video. And the reason why we do this is that we can do deep dives, not only on just these categories, but also in the later categories. We're one of the few places here on YouTube where you can actually see a deep dive on something like the Best Animated Feature category, where we're going to talk about 20-25 minutes. And ultimately, the point of these videos is to help you make your own predictions. I'm going to give my predictions, I'm going to give my thoughts and what I'm going through, but ultimately, we're here to help you with your own predictions. You can hear my thoughts, maybe a reason why you may go with something, even though I'm not going with it, and to help you with your overall predictions and have some fun and watch the kind of waves and the ups and downs and being really wrong in October and then the race completely changing by the end of the year. I think it's going to be a really fun, exciting year, particularly in Best Picture. I've seen a lot of these movies, which I'm very excited to say, but also that doesn't necessarily mean I know what's going to win Best Picture. There are a couple options for sure, and I'm excited to talk about that throughout this channel. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Please do comment. Let me know what your predictions are, what you think is the front runner to win for Best Picture. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out any of these videos. Almost always 12 p.m. on Eastern Time on Mondays. We release a video, but then in the middle of the week, sometimes we'll release some as well, particularly later on, so I don't want you to miss those videos, so please do subscribe and comment below. It helps out the channel. And one last thing before we actually jump into the predictions, timestamps in the description below. So if you don't want to hear this intro every single time and this rambling, just go to the timestamps and you can jump around to hear my individual thoughts or just see my full list of predictions, always there in the description below for every single one of my videos. And I also want to make the caveat that there are these rankings are not necessarily my rankings as to what is going to win Best Picture, but what's the most likely to get nominated. These aren't my power rankings in terms of wins. We'll worry about wins later. Right now, we're worried about nominations, and that will continue throughout all of the different acting categories and below the line categories that we will cover. There will be a video for each of the individual categories, including the new category for casting this year. But starting off with the big one here, Best Picture. And starting off with my first prediction for Best Picture, I think Hamnet will get nominated for Best Picture. This was a movie that I had the pleasure of seeing at the Canadian premiere at TIFF. So I was in the room with a lot of those people that went on and eventually voted for it to win the TIFF People's Choice Awards. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. It really was an emotional experience. And I think eventually went on to win, like I mentioned, the TIFF People's Choice Award, and that's a huge reason why I have it nominated in this high up spot here. Not only do I think it could potentially win Best Picture, but I'm very confident it's going to get nominated because it won TIFF People's Choice Award. If you don't know, 12 out of the last 13 TIFF People's Choice Award winners eventually went on to get nominated for Best Picture. We don't have stats like that. That's a very unique, rare stat where every single year, pretty much, the winner of that prize goes on to get nominated for Best Picture. I don't think it's going to change this year, and it's just this kind of very simple, easy, okay, what won there? Let's put it into our nominations. Now, interestingly, the winner before Hamnet was The Life of Chuck, which was released this year as well. I don't have that spoiler alert in my predictions for this year, so it's going to be actually 12 years in a row of a streak that's going to be stopped. But still a really highly valuable stat. 12 out of the last 13, pretty much every year, 12 years in a row, except for probably this year. That's a huge boost. And I also think in terms of just the strength of the movie itself, What's notable is actually the last three TIFF People's Choice Award winners, not including Hamnet, the last three were world premieres at TIFF. And I mention that because when a movie premieres at TIFF, it's a little bit more of a special thing. It's a little bit more of a, oh, because it didn't play at other festivals, this is kind of our movie, so let's reward our movie. So the fact that Hamnet didn't premiere at TIFF, actually premiered at Telluride, and still won the TIFF People's Choice Award, I think it is a notable factor. I think it's telling and indicates that there's a lot of support from it, not only from the Toronto audience, but also where it premiered at Telluride, where it had a really great response as well. And then the film itself is very emotional, well-reviewed from a director that the Academy we know likes, past Best Picture, Best Director, winning director, Chloe Zhao. And the movie is, I think, ultimately about grief and it's an emotional kind of weepy aspect, which I think a lot of Academy members have experienced in their life, some form of grief, so they'll relate to that on kind of a human emotional level. And then it's also about kind of how artists grieve and the kind of artistic process and the importance of art, which of course the Academy, full of great artists, they're going to really connect and resonate to that message. So even while I don't think this is going to be the best reviewed movie of the year by critics, I do think it's going to really resonate with the Academy. And I think it's probably the front runner in my mind to win Best Picture, but I'm also just very confident that it's also going to get nominated. Then my second pick, I went with One Battle After Another. This has got pretty much everything. The only reason why it's in my number 2 spot is because it didn't play at any festivals, so it doesn't have that kind of festival seal of approval, which, most Best Picture nominees every year played at a festival. So the fact that this didn't was a little bit of a surprise. That being said, it's got everything else. It's literally one of the best reviewed movies of the decade. Critics love it. Audiences are really responding to it too. It's maybe disappointing, I think, at the box office. There's no other way to put that, but I don't think it's ultimately going to hurt the movie. Paul Thomas Anderson, the director and writer behind the movie, hasn't always done well at the box office anyways, and he's done very well at the Oscars. His last 2 movies, Licorice Pizza and Phantom Thread, not only got nominated for Best Picture, but also got him nominated for Best Director. So I'd be very surprised if that doesn't also repeat here for a movie that is even more well-liked and more critically acclaimed than those 2 movies. And not a lot of people think about it this way, but it's also starring Leonardo DiCaprio. And when we don't think of actors and their correlation with the Oscars, I think we should with Leonardo DiCaprio. Why? Well, his last 5 movies, every single one, there's no skips there, his last 5 movies, every single one was nominated for Best Picture. So when he's in a movie, his movie gets nominated for Best Picture. And real contenders too, and directing contenders and Killers of the Flower Moon or The Revenant or Wolf of Wall Street or, Don't Look Up. It's a pretty clear consistency where if he gets nominated, his movie gets nominated, or he's in a movie, his movie gets nominated for Best Picture. Oftentimes he gets nominated as well. So there's a great amount of respect for him in particular. So you have that factor too. Really well critically acclaimed from a well-respected director who has never won before. This may be his big year. I think he's probably the front runner to win for Best Director. Not guaranteed necessarily, but it's going to be an interesting race. And I think it's also just a movie that will appeal to a lot of different people in that it's still broad, entertaining, still kind of an action movie, a little bit more mainstream, but it's got ideas. It's got that Paul Thomas Anderson kind of perversion and sensibility to it, but also those more political, topical ideas of revolutionaries and what's the modern day version of that. So it's populist, it's entertaining, but it's also got some ideas towards it, and I think that's the kind of perfect combination that the Academy loves to reward. It's a major contender, and I do think it's going to get nominated. Then the third movie I have getting nominated for Best Picture is Sentimental Value. This is a movie that maybe earlier on in the season I thought would potentially win Best Picture, and it still may win Best Picture, but maybe a little bit less confident right now. But there's still so many kind of positives towards it, particularly when it comes to getting a nomination. First premiered at Cannes, where it got really great reviews, won the Grand Prix there, the kind of runner-up prize, so a lot of respect from the international members of the Academy. And then it played at Telluride in Toronto, in which it did quite well there. At Toronto, it won second runner-up for the International People's Choice Award, so a lot of appreciation for that film there. Joachim Trier generally, I think, is a filmmaker who's getting more and more well-respected, even though he's been making movies for over a decade. The Worst Person in the World was, I think, a big breakout for him. Even getting an original screenplay nomination, I think, was a positive sign that now the Academy is starting to recognize him. So when you have a movie here that got second up at Cannes, a really super well-reviewed movie, a movie that I think will resonate with every member of the Academy, because it's about these more common themes of like family and the burden of family. I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that. Also a bit of a movie, or not a bit, but definitely a movie about art and artists. And then they can cross both sensibilities, both the international members of the Academy. This is an international filmmaker with a lot of international actors, with a lot of the movie being spoken in Norwegian. But also there are parts spoken in English, and Elle Fanning's in the movie as well. And a lot of her stuff is in English as well. So it can kind of bridge both gaps of international kind of cinema sensibilities, but also American sensibilities. And it's a very broad, not broad, but it's very kind of easy to understand, easy to connect with emotionally movie. It's not like this obscure or hard to connect to art house movie. Still a movie about family, still a movie about kind of love and relationships. And I think it's very well done, and has pretty much been well liked at every single place it's gone. So it's potentially a contender for Best Picture. Also has Neon behind it, who just won for Anora and has won in the past for Parasite, so knows how to essentially get Cannes well-liked movies eventually win for Best Picture. And I do think this is going to be a strong above-the-line movie with potentially 3 acting nominations, a screenplay nomination, directing. It's going to be one of those types of movies more than a technical type of movie. Then in my 4th spot, I have Sinners. And this is a movie that I think some people think potentially is going to win Best Picture. I'm more of the camp that I think it's definitely going to get nominated, and a bunch of nominations, but maybe not that many wins. And that's for a bunch of reasons that we can get into at a later date, just because we're talking about nominations here. But the reason why I do think it's ultimately going to get nominated, and I have it even so high up in my rankings here, number 4 of nominations, is that the Academy has certain slots that they like to give movies to. That ever since the Academy expanded to a definite 10 nominations back in 2021, every single year we've seen at least one blockbuster nominated amongst the 10, whether it be Dune, or Dune 2, or Barbie, or Top Gun Maverick. A kind of mainstream movie released in the first half of the year, or the kind of before the fall film festivals, was nominated for Best Picture. And I think that's just kind of human nature, if you think about it. Would you rather nominate 10 movies that are all kind of well-done human dramas, small independent festival movies? Or do you want to kind of mix things up? You go, these are my top 5 favorite independent kind of small festival movies, but this was my favorite blockbuster of the year. This was my favorite comedy of the year. We are starting to see at least 1 or 2 blockbusters every single year get nominated in this category, whether it's Avatar or Top Gun or Barbie and Oppenheimer, or something like last year with Dune 2 and Wicked. It is a little bit more common, and that's ultimately what Sinners is. It's a visionary film. It's from a writer-director who's gotten a movie nominated before, but it's also a $100 million budget action horror movie released in April from a major studio. So it is still a blockbuster that played like a blockbuster, did very well domestically, almost $400 million internationally. So not like a huge billion-dollar type movie, but really resonated domestically, which I think will help some of the American members of the Academy vote for the film. And it's also similar to One Battle After Another, entertaining action type movie, has those kind of horror genre elements, which I think will push it back from actually getting the win, because not a lot of people like that kind of horror element. It is still a bit of a divisive genre. I mean, certain members of the Academy, I'm sure, don't even watch horror movies. But I still think it will get in because it has the entertainment, the horror, the action, but also has some ideas too. It's not just a generic, Fast and Furious 13. It is something with originality and visionary kind of filmmaking and ideas on its mind, with a singular director and writer in the case of Ryan Coogler. Then in my 5th spot, I have Wicked for Good, which is I don't feel super confident in, but I still think the possibility and the likelihood of it getting nominated is still very high. We have kind of a unique territory with this movie because the last movie came out literally last year. And we don't have kind of a track record of a movie coming out necessarily the year afterwards immediately get nominated for Best Picture. The only kind of case would be something like Lord of the Rings back in the 2000s. But what we have seen is the Lord of the Rings movies, when they like a first movie in a series, they'll often nominate the sequels. We've seen this most recently with Dune. We've seen this most recently with Avatar. So I would be surprised. I don't think there's like an anti-sequel bias within the Academy. So I'd be surprised if they have a movie that they like so much, and a franchise, frankly, that they like so much in Wicked, that got 10 nominations last year for them to not even nominate for Best Picture the next year. And that's what I'm sort of thinking. I do think it will kind of repeat in a lot of those major categories, in actress, in supporting actress, in all the technical categories. But even if, let's say, it's a disappointment, well, okay, it had 10 nominations. Maybe it only gets 5 or 6. Is that going to stop it from getting a nomination for Best Picture? Like, let's say it still gets costume design, production design, visual effects, let's say. And then is it not going to get any acting nominations? Maybe. Let's say it doesn't get any acting nominations. It still get in for Best Picture as the kind of technical love type of a movie in the same way Avatar has, or the Dune movies have in the past. Not any acting nominations, but still with a love of the technical aspects of the film. I also think it's notable that while I don't think this is the last Wicked movie, I think this is seen as a lot of people as part 2 to at least the Broadway stage version of Wicked, and there will be some finality to the story, so there will be kind of an extra aspect of satisfaction when the movie ends and wanting to see how they kind of do the story, and that they're kind of these 2 movies will be kind of sister movies as a part, because they're essentially the play split into 2. So I think there's going to be a want that we like the first part, now let's actually reward the kind of finale, the end part of at least this story. Like I said, I don't think this is going to be the last Wicked movie, but I think enough Academy members do think it's going to be the last Wicked movie. So a little bit concerned that it's so quick after. Literally last year it got nominated for Best Picture. That being said, I also go, well, last year they loved it, so why won't they nominate this one, which is the second part of the same story, the same actors, the same director, going to be a big box office hit late in the year, so it's going to have that visibility and dominating the trades and top of mind awareness, which is always so crucial. So why not something like Wicked? I do think it's ultimately going to get in for that 5th spot, and I'm relatively confident now that I'm talking it through that it will get nominated, just because there's just so many avenues and so many options for it. Even if it disappoints, I still think at least the Academy has shown so much love for it. I'd be surprised if they just kind of toss it to the curb for the sequel. Then in my 6th slot, I went with Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, a movie that amongst the movies I've listed so far probably has the worst reviews. Premiered at Telluride and had pretty good reviews, but maybe not great reviews. Very much of a typical biopic where they're trying maybe something a little bit different, but it's still kind of telling the beats of someone's life and their story. That being said, you may ask yourself, well then Connor, why are you picking this movie to get nominated for Best Picture? And that is to say, I'm betting on biopics. In particular, I'm betting on musical biopics. In the same way, last year with A Complete Unknown, which not a lot of people had in their predictions back in October, by the way, I had in my predictions sight unseen, because I thought, well, they really like biopics and music biopics, and Bob Dylan is a famous musician, so why not? And you had a famous actor in Timothée Chalamet portraying him. And I went back and checked it once again. And out of the last 10 years, 7 out of the last 10 years, there's a true biopic where I'm talking about a famous person like a Winston Churchill or, Freddie Mercury. 7 out of the last 10 years, we've had a biopic nominated for Best Picture. So what's it going to be this year? That's the question you should be asking yourself. Of the ones that we've listed, you remiss to say that Hamnet is a biopic of any sorts, but Springsteen's Deliver Me From Nowhere is a true, proper biopic. It's only a part of his life, but it's someone playing a really famous person and a musician in that. So I said 7 in the last 10 years, but what I think is even more notable is the last 3 years in a row, not only have we had a biopic nominated for Best Picture, we've had a biopic of a musician nominated for Best Picture. Last year, A Complete Unknown. The year before that, Maestro. The year before that, Elvis. So we're on a bit of a streak right now. So who's to say we have a Telluride Fall Film Festival release from 2 really exciting directors, from a director who is respected within Hollywood in particular. He always works with great actors, that being Scott Cooper, from a big studio in the case of 20th Century. Why are we to say that this won't get nominated? That's the kind of position I'm in right now, and the kind of process point of view of, I have not seen the movie, unfortunately, so I can't comment on its quality. But the Academy likes these biopics. They like the actor showcases playing these people that we know, famous people. In the case of Bruce Springsteen, I would say just as famous as someone like a Bob Dylan, more famous than even a Leonard Bernstein. He is of that kind of a caliber, of that level of a Freddie Mercury or an Elvis. And I think what's also notable that maybe not a lot of people are talking about is that Searchlight Pictures, which is also part of the Fox branch of Disney. They don't really have a big Best Picture contender this year. They may have one later on, we'll talk about that, but they really don't have a big one this year. And most of the time, they do have a big one. But 20th Century Studios, which is also part of the kind of Fox Disney branch, They do have one, I think, a strong contender here with Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. So who's to say that Disney won't take some of the campaigning budget that they allocated to Searchlight Pictures and put it towards 20th Century Studios? So now you have even more campaign dollars to really try to get this movie nominated. All those kind of behind the scenes factors that maybe not a lot of people think about or discuss, I think could really help a movie that, at least in its structure, in its kind of packaging, we know should be theoretically well liked by the Academy. So why not predict it? That's my point of view here. I do think it's going to get a couple of acting nominations, maybe a screenplay, and then get in for picture, and that's its kind of path here. So I'm betting on the musical biopic. It hasn't let me down in the past few years. I predicted Elvis, I predicted Maestro. Even when people were against Maestro and at that kind of poor Venice review, I still held strong. So I'm still going to put my chips again. I've had a lot of success with musical biopics. I'm going to predict Springsteen once again, another music biopic, to get nominated for Best Picture. And then in my 7th spot, I went with No Other Choice. And really from here on out for the rest of this list, you'll start to see more international movies dominate and get nominated within the second half of the list. And why is that? Well, it's because we have the luxury of now 10 seasons of Oscar predictions every single year. You can go back and check my predictions, but also I can check my predictions, and I can check my process, and I can check data to see where was I getting things wrong. And what I've noticed, particularly when watching my past Best Picture videos, last year I didn't have I'm Still Here in my predictions. A couple years before that, I didn't have Triangle of Sadness in my Best Picture predictions. But interestingly, 2 years ago, back in October, I looked at my Best Picture predictions, and I got 9 out of the 10 in that video, which I think is pretty good. All the way up in October, for months later, to get 9 out of 10 is pretty good to see it that early. And what I did was bet on international films. I bet that The Zone of Interest and The Anatomy of a Fall both will get nominated for Best Picture. And then the years that I didn't do as well, I'm Still Here miss, The Triangle of Sadness miss, it's because I didn't bet. I didn't believe in those kind of international films. So I'm not going to make this mistake again. If anything, I'm going to try and over-index on international films, because we're really seeing ever since the Academy expanded its membership that the international members of the Academy are more likely to reward non-Hollywood movies not in English. And that's exactly what you have here with No Other Choice. So the question now is not, okay, Connor, why did you choose an international movie? It's why did you choose this international movie, right? So I'll explain why. First off, it played at a couple of festivals. Premiered at Venice, didn't win any prizes, but that was a weird kind of a jury and a weird year in terms of the winners. None of the big Oscar contenders really got anything. But it still got really great reviews out of Venice from critics and people who saw it. The next thing, though, is that it next premiered at TIFF, where I saw it, and it won the very first International Film People's Choice Award. So we know that the People's Choice Award is super valuable. 12 out of the last 13 winners went on to get nominated for Best Picture. So who's to say the International People's Choice Award won't be relevant? What's it indicating to us is that the Toronto audience is really indicative of what the Academy likes. So the fact that the Toronto audience loved No Other Choice, so much so to give it number 1 in its International People's Choice Award category, I think is a testament to how well liked this movie is. Now, personally, I've seen the movie itself, so I can understand why it did win. This is not a kind of strange art house, hard to understand movie. It's very Parasite coded in that way. It's a biting satire on a man who loses his jobs and kind of what it takes to kind of get that job back without spoiling anything. But it's very funny. It's very broad. So I don't think it's going to be, like I said, this weird art house, hard to connect to movie. It's actually based on an American English novel, so I do think it will kind of appeal to some of the even American members of the Academy. It's very easy to understand, like I said, Parasite coded in that way. And then you have a great director in Park Chan-wook, who hasn't been supported as much by the Academy, but a lot of his real contenders were pre the international expansion of the Academy. The only real contender that he had post the international expansion of the Academy would be Decision to Leave, which is a great movie, but it's also a movie that is very confusing at times and a little bit cold, a little bit distant. It's more of a mystery, right? No Other Choice is not that. No Other Choice is much more of a comedy. There are big laugh lines that even myself as a non-Korean person really connected to and enjoyed. So I do think that even though my only reservation is why haven't they really appreciated Park in the past, but I think he's a well-liked director who's now made multiple movies that have kind of crossed into at least somewhat Academy critic attention, whether it be The Handmaiden or No Other Choice, or even some of his American TV work with The Little Drummer Girl, where he worked with Florence Pugh, or The Sympathizer, where he's working with Robert Downey Jr. He has still American contacts as well, so he has kind of that international support being a Korean director, but I think the movie itself will appeal to a lot of different cultures. And then also he has now a little bit more American experience. He did back in 2013 with Stoker, but more recently he's been doing a lot of American type of TV shows. So, you just build contacts and build relationships there, right? That eventually helps you in terms of, oh, I know Park, I'm going to nominate him for Best Picture. Having friends within Hollywood as well as international filmmaking community, that can be very powerful too. So I do think Park Chan-wook and director Park has the right movie this time that will appeal and eventually will get nominated for Best Picture. And then my 8th pick, I went with It Was Just an Accident. Kind of a sister pick here with No Other Choice, another international movie, and in many ways maybe more likely to get nominated. I'm a little bit concerned about the content of the movie itself, but at least on paper it is the classic type of a movie to get nominated for Best Picture, which is why once again I'm having a kind of process-based approach to my predictions. And the process-based approach tells me that if you have a Palme d'Or winner distributed by Neon, it's mostly going to get nominated for Best Picture. Why is that? Well, Neon, not including this movie, the last 5 Palme d'Or winners at the Cannes Film Festival, 4 out of the 5 got nominated for Best Picture. So it indicates to me that, in the past that wasn't always the case. As a matter of fact, it was pretty rare for a Palme d'Or winner in the 2010s, let's say, to win and then get nominated for Best Picture. But recently, with the more recent international expansion of the Academy, the Cannes audience is a little bit more indicative of what the Oscars like as well. And whether it be Triangle of Sadness or Honora last year, Neon does a great job at taking the Palme d'Or winner and getting it nominated for Best Picture. So who's to say they won't do that again this year? You have a movie that is similar to No Other Choice in that it's not this art house indie type of a movie. It's not cold. It's not distant. It won't be difficult for American audiences to understand. I do think it has that kind of a broad appeal. It's a very talky movie. Its ideas are very on the surface, in your face, similar to No Other Choice. There's not going to be any people, I think, misinterpreting this kind of a movie. It's about kind of talking through some of trauma and guilt and anger and resentment and different ways to do things. It's a very unique, interesting concept as well. And the ending is very well done, and I think will stick with a lot of people. So it always helps to have kind of like that end point that you're walking out on. Similar to Park Chan-wook as well, Jafar Panahi is maybe a little bit more of a critic's director. He hasn't maybe broken out as much as Park Chan-wook, but still is well respected and has had multiple years of critical love with a lot of his movies. No Bears, This Is Not a Film. So you have some appreciation of a director and a well-respected director, and then you have a movie that just won the Palme d'Or, distributed by Neon, that I do think has kind of more broad appeal. Now, this movie did show up at TIFF and did not appear at the TIFF People's Choice nominations in terms of runner-up, so maybe it wasn't as well-liked here at TIFF, and I don't think it's as well liked as a movie like Sentimental Value, which we talked about a little bit earlier. But like I mentioned, I do think ultimately you have a Palme d'Or winner distributed by Neon. That is a good movie. I have seen it. I do think will resonate and have that broad appeal. So ultimately, I want to over-index in international cinema. That's what it really has demonstrated to us the past few years. That's what the modern day Academy appreciates. So I went with It Was Just an Accident to get nominated here in my 8th spot. Then in my 9th spot, I have Marty Supreme. And in the future, maybe looking back on this, it may be a surprise that I had it this low, or maybe it was a stroke of genius that I maybe didn't have it in my predictions at all. The reason why Marty Supreme is all the way down here at number 9 is because I haven't seen it. No one has seen it. It's one of the few movies that didn't premiere at any festivals. So we're kind of basing our predictions based on what we think the movie is going to be rather than what the movie is, which is always a dangerous proposition. In the past, I predicted a movie like Blitz to get nominated and it didn't, or The Color Purple for a similar reason. There's always a risk here when you predict a movie that you haven't seen. But let's look at maybe the strong reasons why I do think it's going to get nominated here for Best Picture. And the first one being, it's from A24. And A24, almost every year, has something nominated for Best Picture, whether it be The Brutalist last year, or whether it be Past Lives or The Zone of Interest the year before that, or the year before that. It won Best Picture with Everything Everywhere All at Once, and had a great year. So A24 is a serious contender when it comes to the Oscars and Best Picture every single year. And this year, if it's not Marty Supreme, I guess it could be The Smashing Machine, but that's really, it's only serious contender outside of Marty Supreme. So what that tells me is they're going to put all their eggs behind Marty Supreme. They're going to put this as their main Oscar contender. So you have a strong distributor who oftentimes gets nominated for Best Picture. Well, what movie is that going to be this year? I think it's going to be Marty Supreme. You also have the extra benefit factor of Timothée Chalamet, and he's not on the Leonardo DiCaprio status just yet. But what I do think is notable is that he's been in 4 movies in this decade, in the 2010s, that have been nominated for Best Picture. I mean, there's only been 5 years of opportunities, so technically, pretty much every year, like DiCaprio, one of his movies gets nominated for Best Picture. I think that's really notable, and I just went to the 2020s. If you want to go back to 2017 with Lady Bird or Call Me by Your Name, or 2019 with Little Women, he's got a real strong record here where if he's in a movie, oftentimes it gets nominated for Best Picture. So like DiCaprio, Chalamet is super well respected. So you have that. You have the fact that it's A24. And I think that the third factor, which is arguably the biggest factor, is that it's a late release that nobody has seen. And we usually get at least one of these every single year, whether it be kind of Wicked last year, which came out in November and surprised everyone. And this is a major Oscar contender. We didn't really know that. We were surprised by that. A couple of years before that, you had movies like Avatar: The Way of Water or Don't Look Up. You could even see A Complete Unknown last year. There are these movies, even going back to something like Vice in 2018, where they don't play at any fall film festivals. We're worried, is this going to be a real contender? Is this not? It comes out in press screenings in November, West Side Story being another one. And it just surprises everyone. And we go, wow, we haven't really seen this. This is an exciting movie. Let's put it in the Oscar race. And actually, it can be really beneficial for a movie to be like that. I mean, 1917 almost won by having that strategy, by not playing at any film festivals. Because when you play at a film festival, you're competing with the best of the best. If Marty Supreme is just okay and played at TIFF, let's say, well, then it's going to get dominated by some of the other movies of Knives Out and Frankenstein and everything else that was playing there that was so well liked. But now, with not playing the festivals, being at your own kind of a category here with a December Christmas release, if it is good, it will dominate the conversation and have that benefit of being the most recent thing a lot of people have seen. And that's, Oscar voters are humans at the end of the day. The last great thing you've seen stays in your mind more than a movie like Sinners, or you saw back in April, and you'd have to ask people to kind of rewatch that movie to get their appreciation again. See an exciting movie in November, maybe December with Marty Supreme right before Oscar voting is a huge boon. The real question, though, is will it be good? And that's something we don't know. And we know this from Josh Safdie, who's made a lot of good movies in the past with his brother, like Uncut Gems or Good Time. We know Chalamet is often in a lot of good movies. We know A24 makes a lot of good movies, and that they're likely going to put their support behind this. And that's a big, budgeted, original, Catch Me If You Can-esque kind of a drama, which we know the Academy should like. So everything is lining up, which is why I put it in the 9th spot. But the reason why it's not 5 and it's number 9 is because no one has seen it, and I want to be conservative because maybe it's not good and it won't even be in contention at all. That is also a possibility. Then in my 10th spot, I went with Bugonia, and this is not a super confident pick, but it never is in the 10th spot. Of course, we're still super early on in the season, so once again, similar to my other picks, I want you to have a kind of process and to trust that process and to go with it. And that process is to trust in Yorgos Lanthimos. His last 3 movies, 2 of them were nominated for Best Picture, and 2 of them had major acting prize wins. So who's to say that in both of those cases, they were movies that were released at fall film festivals and then went on to get a bunch of nominations in Best Picture. So who's to say that that's not going to happen again here with Bugonia? I have a little bit of a concern because it wasn't amazingly well loved out of Venice. It didn't win any kind of a prize there, which was a little bit surprising in my mind. It's a little bit of a smaller stakes movie as well. It's not the big extravagant productions of Poor Things or The Favorite, which got all those technical nominations. I don't predict Bugonia to have those. That being said, I do think Jesse Plemons is a potential contender for Best Actor, and I do think Emma Stone will get in for Best Actress this year. So you have some acting support, which is always crucial for Best Picture nominees. It's always helpful to have some acting support. Most of the time, a Best Picture nominee has some sort of acting nomination to kind of line up with that. So I think that's notable and important. And then, it's still got pretty good reviews out of Venice, particularly the people that have seen it actually mention it being a little bit more broad, maybe a little bit more like The Lobster. So, or Poor Things, which are two movies that got some recognition from the Oscars. So a little bit more dark in its point of view, but still kind of broad and funny, kind of classic Yorgos appeal. And I do think that Yorgos is a director that's very well respected within the Academy and respected in the modern Academy because he is an international director, but working with Hollywood movie stars, making his movies in English. But then this is also a remake of the South Korean film, so there's going to be some appreciation there, I'm sure, by the Asian cinema members of the Academy. So there is kind of a broad appeal of this movie. Also is being distributed by Focus Features, who has Hamnet in this consideration, but they've had multiple years where they've had multiple Best Picture nominations. Most recently, they had Licorice Pizza and Belfast both get nominated for Best Picture, so who's to say they won't do it again? So strong distributor, strong filmmaker, strong reviews. It may not be the kind of below-the-line love and huge factor of something like Poor Things or The Favourite, but it's a well-reviewed Yorgos Lanthimos movie starring Emma Stone. Most of the time, those get nominated for Best Picture, so right now I have Bugonia here in my kind of tentative 10th spot. Okay, now let's talk about maybe a couple of possible contenders here just to round up the video as to who I think maybe could sneak in there. The first one being Is This Thing On? I teased it a little bit earlier on at the top, but Searchlight Pictures is a really strong distributor, and almost every single year they have a movie nominated for Best Picture. Right now, in my 10, they don't have a single movie. I don't think they're going to get one this year. And that's kind of a reason why Is This Thing On? I didn't ultimately include it in my predictions because on paper it should get nominated, right? First off, it's from Bradley Cooper, the director, who, as a director, has made 2 movies. Both of those movies got nominated for Best Picture. So who's to say his third movie won't get nominated for Best Picture? Well, unfortunately, all the signs kind of point to it not. First off, it's being maybe a little bit more of a smaller personal story about a comedian, more of a human drama. There's not going to have the kind of huge importance of remaking A Star Is Born or a huge biopic in black and white spanning multiple years of a Leonard Bernstein. He's also not in the movie as the main character, unlike his past 2 movies. So it's not maybe that kind of extra passion project that people will see it as. Maybe they'll just see it as him behind the camera doing a favor for his friend in something like Will Arnett. So I'm a little bit concerned about the kind of scale of the movie. It may be very good, but it may not be as important. And the Academy likes importance. The other concern is that why is this movie playing at the New York Film Festival? Why didn't it premiere at something like Venice, which Maestro did? Now I have, my own reasons why. For example, Maestro and the New York Film Festival really appreciated that movie and it helped give it a second life after it had middling reviews out of Venice. But still, most of the time, movies that premiere just at the New York Film Festival in past years haven't been Oscar contenders. Think of something like just Anemone, which just premiered, which, that it got a New York Film Festival premiere, but then, maybe it's not going to get a lot of nominations. And then similarly in the past with something like Blitz, there are these kinds of movies that when they premiere at New York Film Festival, they're not always Oscar contenders. So there's a little bit of concern there from a quality point of view. And then also just the signs of Searchlight. Why did Searchlight purchase distribution to release this year for The Testament of Anne Lee? I think because they want an Oscar contender and they don't feel very confident in their Oscar contenders of Rental Family or of Is This Thing On? Now this may all be false. We're all just thinking about things. No one's seen the movie. Maybe it comes out and it's great and it's Bradley Cooper, so of course it's going to get nominated and I'll easily put it in my top 10 predictions. But all the signs, him not being in it won't seem as important. Searchlight purchasing other fall film festival movies, it doesn't indicate to me a strong sign of support that they feel good that Rental Family or Is This Thing On will get nominated for Best Picture. And then just the kind of New York Fall Film Festival premiere doesn't necessarily have the best track record of movies that premiere there end up getting nominated for Best Picture. There isn't really a pipeline of that necessarily. And then my other possible contender, I went with Avatar: Fire and Ash. This is a pretty simple kind of reasoning for and against. The reasoning for, it's Avatar. The past 2 movies got nominated for Best Picture. So why not this one? The potential kind of conclusion to a trilogy. They say they may make 4 and 5, but I'm more and more by the day convinced that James Cameron won't direct 4 and 5. This will be his last Avatar movie. He'll start to do more smaller personal stuff. That being said, so that's kind of the pros. That being said, the cons are that it's pretty obvious why the first 2 movies got nominated. The first movie got nominated because it was new. It was a huge phenomenon, the biggest movie of the year, made all this money. It's James Cameron, new exciting technology. How did they do this? Just new. The second one was new in its own way. It was 13 years since the first movie. It was a completely different story, huge leap in the visual effects. And yet still that movie only got a few of the technical nominations, and I think was probably in the 10th slot to get nominated for Best Picture. Then I look at our lineup right now. I think Sinners, which is a blockbuster, gets in. I think Wicked, which is a blockbuster, gets in. Will they want to nominate a third blockbuster? Another fall blockbuster in the same way I think they're going to nominate Wicked? No, I don't think so. Now, it may be more action-focused. It may be a kind of conclusion to a story. It may be interesting visually because you have the fire aspect of things. But I think, very simply, the first movie was new and exciting. The second one got nominated because it was 13 years and was a big comeback and made a lot of money. Now, just a few years after the second movie, and the third Avatar doesn't have that same newness that the other two do, that were fascinating and exciting and felt like a technical marvel that the Academy had to reward. It's not as special because of just the more recent release. We just had Avatar, so I think people aren't going to feel the need to rush out and nominate it. I think if James Cameron really wants this to get nominated, he probably would come out and say, this is my last Avatar movie. This is my last chance to reward James Cameron's Avatar before maybe the decreases in value in 4 and 5. Who knows? Who's to say? But that's kind of the reasonings for and against. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts on my predictions, and let me know your own predictions. I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. Truly, we don't get a lot of huge views on this. I don't make any money on these videos. I do this because I've been doing this for 9 years, 10 seasons, because I love the community, and I love to hear your guys' thoughts. So please feel free, if you made it this far in the video, just leave me a comment or let me know your predictions. I do genuinely appreciate that, and I am interested in what other people have to say. But that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.